When you talk about bumping a player, it's pretty much
great courage. One that says the bump is dead, that's how you deliver it.
What is going on, YouTube universe? My name is Trent and welcome to my AFL channel, The Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And after a week away from the podcast, the round recap returns and we are going to be looking at the fallout of round 10 of the 2024 AFL season, which would have to be one of the most wild rounds of football that we have seen in at least this particular season, because we had history defining moments, we had controversial moments, we had a comeback of the ages, and we had some absolutely bottomed out miserable moments, especially if you're like me and you're a Richmond supporter. Before we dive on in, I just want to thank everybody for getting behind myself over the last week and a bit. There was obviously no podcast last week. I took that time for myself and my family. My grandmother had passed away, and I just want to thank you all for reaching out on social media, reaching out in the comments of other videos as well, and on the community post that I put up on the community tab here on the Hip and Shoulder, just to, you know, give me your warm wishes and all your best. It truly means a lot. Thank you all so much. But we're diving straight on in, no fucking around. TIO Stadium up in Darwin kicked off Thursday night, round 10 action with the Gold Coast hosting Geelong. This was a game that I went into with the mindset of Gold Coast were going to win this game. Now, that was because of one of two reasons. The first of which was the outs for Geelong, which compacted a little bit prior to the bounce of the game, really. We had Jeremy Cameron out due to concussion. They decided to manage Tom Hawkins. They managed Reece Stanley. They had De Koning dropped from the team prior to the game, so they had some big gaps to fill. And then the other reason, when the Gold Coast have acted as the home team up in Darwin, they are undefeated. It is such a tantalizing prospect to speak about, especially if it's just a discussion point, that if the national game is ever going to expand, and we obviously have Tasmania joining within the next, 3, 4, 5 years, if they ever look at bringing a Darwin team in, which would round out the competition in my eyes anyway, would you consider moving a team like the Gold Coast Suns to Darwin, facilitate a complete rebrand, because we know Gold Coast heading into 2025 are looking at rebranding their logo, rebranding their jumper. They're still wanting to keep the Suns as their moniker, but they just perform out of their skin when it comes to playing up in Darwin. The Bulldogs have been the only team so far that have come close to touching them. I think there was a game where it was either 6 or 7 points that they fell by, but every other game that they have played, they have won by 40, 50, 60 plus points. I did not have on my bingo card heading into round 10 that not only would the Gold Coast win by 10 plus goals against Geelong this weekend, but they would make history, club history that is, by scoring 164 points. And that's not to discredit Geelong's effort, because while Jeremy Cameron and Tom Hawkins were out of this side, Geelong still were able to generate 100 points of their own. 15 goals 10 against the Gold Coast 26 goals 8. It just blew my mind to see the level that the Gold Coast elevated to. Now, you could argue that the first half of the game was dictated by indecision and probably a one-way, more weighted call from the umpires. And look, if you're new around here, if this is the first time you're tuning into one of these videos that I do, we talk about the umpires quite extensively each and every week. And I think, unfortunately, we aren't going to find a time anytime soon where the umpires in some way, shape or form aren't going to be on the tips of our tongues. And I'm not at all saying at any point when I talk about umpiring decision or indecision that it's costing games, that teams that are underperforming, especially my boys in Richmond, are losing because of decisions that aren't paid to them, because they do well enough on their own to lose those type of games. But I'm pretty sure at half-time for the Gold Coast Geelong game, the free kick count was something outrageous, like 16-3 in the way of the Gold Coast. It was, at that point in time, one of the most one-sided deliberations of a game of football that we have seen all year. Now, we can pinpoint throughout the season moments where umpiring indecision may have cost an outcome. We obviously know Essendon versus Adelaide ended in a decision that wasn't made that should have been made against Sam Draper for holding the ball. We know that earlier in the season, Carlton versus North Melbourne, they kicked 8 or 9 goals off of free kicks and 50-metre penalties alone, which obviously tipped the scales a little bit in the way of Carlton that game. There have been other kind of scenarios around, like with the Fremantle game against Carlton, where the ball was touched and then they paid that free kick late for umpire dissent, but then the umpire has come out and said to Alex Pearce, the Fremantle captain, that he didn't 100% hear what was said, but still felt it was enough to be called dissent. It's just things like that, and then you witness games like this where the decisions are so one-sided that it's hard to watch as a neutral supporter, because you're watching from home and you can just hear the opposition crowd. So in this case, it was the Geelong fans up at Darwin just booing and struggling to get into the game because every decision was going the way of the Gold Coast. And then you'd have a Gold Coast player, get caught holding the ball, but it's not paid. And then a Geelong player would get touched and then instantly it's holding the ball. It's the inconsistency of the calls that are being made that I think is straining the AFL fan base collectively. Not going to get too much into it now, but there are some points later on in this video in different matches that we're going to talk about some other points as well, but I did want to point that out because I do remember watching it and having a conversation with some people during the game in which we were just baffled that it was just so one-sided. And then obviously the umpires then come out in the second half and try to even the game up, and I don't think they should ever try to even the game up because they've given one team a heavier jump in the first half. It makes the prospect of the game needing to be called correctly in the first place a little bit redundant. But regardless of that fact, as I said, you could say that all those indecisions Geelong's way early, maybe hampered them in getting scores on the board, but they still managed to score 15 goals 10. They still put 100 points up. And a lot of people could argue that, they did well without Hawkins and Cameron. They did. They scored 100 points. But to still then lose by 10 goals just blows my mind. It's very rare in this day and age with football that a team registers 100 points themselves and then still lose by 10 goals. It's something we don't comprehend. It's something we don't think of. That being said, with Jeremy Cameron and Tom Hawkins and De Koning and Reece Stanley all out, you would think some other players would kind of stand tall and live up to fill that void. But it was still the same players from Geelong that are doing all the damage. It's your Max Holmes, your Brian Myers, your Oliver Dempsey. Tom Stewart, surprisingly, in his career, has never had a game of football where he hasn't taken at least one mark. He went markless for this game, which again sets precedent for history, especially for his career, because we have come to appreciate Tom Stewart as this strong intercept defender. His prowess defensively is accredited to, the accolades he has accumulated over his career. But to take him out of the game like Gold Coast did, nullify his presence totally, really opened the door for Gold Coast to capitalise when moving the ball forward. And you could argue as well, okay, Gold Coast, their A-tier players were the ones that carried this team. Your Noah Andersons, your Sam Flanders, Matt Rowell. Alex Sexton has come back in recent weeks, and he played a big instrumental part in this win. Tuke Miller getting the job done like he usually does. But then you have a look down the list, and you have players like Joel Jeffrey, Thomas Berry, Bodie Hewland, Ned Moyle. These players that have been thereabouts that sometimes can't get into this team, or when they are in the team, they've been underperforming, especially in recent weeks, all played pivotal part. It was a collective cohesive performance from the Gold Coast that managed to secure them this history-making win. And you get a real belief about the Gold Coast and Damien Hardwick's thought process about the fact when he rocked up to this club, he said 90% of our premiership team is here. And a lot of people would have laughed that off. And then you see performances like this, and then you start to question, well, do they have the makeup for this premiership team he's talking about? It's just the inconsistency from this team that I think leaves people guessing, because they'll have a big win here, but then they could very well drop a game the very next week, and it leaves you in no man's land, just a little bit. As far as best on ground goes, and the way I'm going to handle the hip and shoulder MVP situation moving forward, if you're new to the channel, I'll break that down for you right now. The MVP award is obviously just myself reflecting over each and every game at the end of the recap, giving out 3-2-1 votes like the Brownlow does, and just working out who I think in my mind is the MVP player of that particular season. Something I've never done before, but given we've got a brand new channel here and we're doing different things that I've never done before, it's something I want to get into. Normally I would leave that at the end of the video, run down every game, 3-2-1, and then we would do a tally. But I think moving forward, just for a little bit more fluidity, as we go through each and every game and break it all down, I'm going to give my best on ground 3-2-1, and then at the end, we just do a recap of who's currently sitting in that top 5. So, for me, this week, it was hard to dish out the 1 vote. The 3 and the 2 were quite compelling, but the 1 vote, you could bounce around a few people. Now, as I turned around and said, Alex Sexton had a really big game. He had 32 possessions, ran at 81.3%. He had 800 meters gained. 26 of those disposals were effective. Only 5 were contested, so he had a lot of uncontested ball. He took 10 marks. He was thereabouts. He had a rather big game. Tuke Miller in similar fashion. Sam Flanders had 37 disposals. 31 of those were effective. 9 contested possessions, took the 7 marks. However, I went for Jack Lukosius for the 1 vote. Probably a little bit left wing. Some people might not agree with me, but Jack Lukosius was one of 2 players on the night for the Gold Coast that kicked 5 goals. Bailey Humphrey was the other. I think when Jack Lukosius kicked his, they were in pivotal moments, and he might have only had the 16 disposals. He ran at 87.5%. He had almost 300 meters gained. He had 7 contested possessions, as I said. He had the 5 goals kicked on the day. He was just pivotal up forward. I think he set the tone when it comes to hitting the board early and really helped Gold Coast establish their footing at the beginning of the game. The 2 votes for me goes to Matt Rowell. He had a really solid defensive game. He had the 35 disposals of his own. He only ran at 68%, so it's a little bit down on effort from his part, but it's the 10 tackles he laid. It's the 11 score involvements he had. The 3 direct goal assists. He kicked the 1 goal himself. He had 13 contested possessions. He had 8 clearances. He was back to his best after having a few down weeks, and it's no surprise that Gold Coast starts shining more like they did this week when Matt Rowell is back at his best. Best on ground, comfortably for me, Noah Anderson. 42 disposals, 88% efficiency, just shy of 700 meters gained, 37 effective disposals, 11 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 2 goals won, 1 direct goal assist, 4 tackles, 15 score involvements. He was huge in this game, and I don't see anybody who would take that 3 votes away from him. On Friday night at the SCG, we had Sydney hosting Carlton. I touted this game as one of the games of the round. I thought it was going to be a hell of a lot closer. I did not think Sydney were going to be 52 points better on the night, but that just goes to show how big a disparagement there is between Sydney and the rest of the competition. Sydney now have established their footing as the best team in the comp, and there is daylight between them and the next best. I found it hard for so many weeks to split Sydney and GWS in their systems, in the way they go about things with their list, but it is clearly evident now who the best is, and it's really a position where it's got me thinking where this kind of newfound energy from this club has come from. I've spoken about it in recent weeks, where I feel Lance Franklin, as much as he's going to go down in history as an AFL legend, he'll be, he'll be getting all those accolades when the time comes. Hall of Famer, AFL legend, best modern forward of the AFL, in history. Throw anything at him. He deserves everything coming his way. But I think still the best thing that happened for Sydney was his retirement, because they're now not so one-dimensional moving the ball forward. They're not just looking for Buddy. They have an even spread. It is no coincidence that his absence has now allowed other players to get injected into this game and used more frequently, and the spread is now a lot more even, and they've got more avenues to score, and they've got consistently more people adding to the scoreboard. You look at their midfield core, and their midfield core alone can hit the scoreboard just as hard. You've got Chad Warner that comes out of this game. He kicks 3 goals. Isaac Heaney, 3 goals. Errol Goulden didn't score a goal this week, but he's been scoring goals. You look at this core and you think to yourself, is there a midfield core currently that is so well-rounded like Sydney's core? Defensively, they lay tackles, they spoil the ball, their efforts are second to none. Offensively, forward of the ball, terrific speed, great use of the footy, can hit the scoreboard. They're so perfectly built, this core. It's no surprise that players like Luke Parker are struggling to break into this team. Luke Parker, by the way, I think has just copped a 6-week ban for a hit in the VFL. Could be 6 weeks. I think they were going to give him 4, but I think they ended up upping it. It was quite a big hit. It brings up a strong discussion point as well as to whether or not Isaac Heaney already has the Brownlow wrapped up. And I personally, going off of the MVP votes that I've been giving, I'm trying to be so in tune with how I think the Brownlow votes are going to fall as well. Sometimes I might give a vote to someone who I think might not get a Brownlow vote, but I liked how they performed. But as far as Isaac Heaney has gone and some other players that I've been giving votes to, I think they will probably be thereabouts in the Brownlow. And there's only probably a couple of players that I've got challenging Isaac Heaney at this point in time. Zach Merritt obviously being the biggest threat in my eyes. But the Brownlow predictor on the AFL app actually has Isaac Heaney winning this quite comfortably, and I don't know whether it's just going to take a severe drop-off from here to drop it and lose it. But he's playing out of his skin. This is the best season he's ever had. And again, begs the question as to why it's taken Horse so long to finally give this bloke midfield time, because he's absolutely fucking sensational when given the minutes. We need to now look at the flip side of things. We're talking about how good Sydney have been. Carlton start like a house on fire, but have dropped off to the point where they're now outside of the top 8. And questions always get asked to myself whether or not Carlton's success hinges on their forward structure, mainly Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow. And if those guys aren't firing, are Carlton good enough to win, without them effectively? When we look collectively at the score line here, I don't think either Harry Mackay or Charlie Curnow really had that much impact at all. I mean, Harry Mackay kicks 1, Charlie Curnow kicks 2. They had a handful of disposals between them, but they ran at efficiencies that are rather quite low. I mean, Harry Mackay ran at 64%, Charlie Curnow ran at 57%. They just didn't really hold up their end of the table. Like, they plucked 9 and 8 marks respectively. They were getting their hands on the ball, but they just weren't translating that to scores. And unfortunately, when those are your 2 key avenues to score, they're getting plenty of the ball, but they're obviously not getting it close enough to home, or they're just wavering in form a little bit. It's very interesting, because I've always had the thought process of one of them can afford to be down, the other one's going to get off the chain. But this was a game where I thought to myself, especially early, because they did get their hands on the ball quite a bit, I thought, okay, here we go, Carlton's on here. They're getting the ball, they're using it well, they're getting it to their big men. If they can continue to do this, they're going to get, a real run for their money. Did not happen to be the case at all. And in the end, it was, again, just usual suspects from Carlton standing tall but not being able to deliver. I mean, Patrick Cripps, he's been playing out of his skin for weeks and weeks and weeks. He only has 24 disposals this week and runs at 41% disposal efficiency. Blake Acres only has 23. He still runs at 73%, so he's still good with ball in hand. Sam Walsh kept to 20 disposals, clamped by James Jordan, and he runs at 55%. So it was the midfield core that has been so dominant for Carlton that were clamped down, and it took away that first ball use. So in this instance, I don't think we can blame the forward line for falling short. I think it's the fact that the midfield has kind of dropped off, and it just goes to show that if you can clamp particular players, you take influence out of the game. And Patrick Cripps, Sam Walsh, it's those players that are used to getting hands on the ball first, take them out of the equation, and it just completely shut the game down for Carlton. And Sydney, again, run away with a very convincing win, and they further push their place at the top of the ladder. Votes this week, I think, are going to go against the grain for some, because the 3 and the 2 that I've given, you could arguably swap around and adjust based on my personal opinion. The 1 vote to me goes to Nick Newman. Even though they lost by 52 points, Nick Newman had 32 disposals, 87% efficiency, 660 metres gained, 8 marks, 2 score involvements, 3 tackles. He was really one of the only players for Carlton, even late in the game, that was still showing any form of structure or effort when the game was already out of hand. The 2 vote is going to Chad Warner. Now, a lot of people would argue Chad Warner was best on ground. He had 28 disposals, 78% disposal efficiency, 560 metres gained, 10 contested possessions. He had 2 clearances, 4 marks, 3 goals, 2, 14 score involvements, and laid the 4 tackles. But I've given best on to Heaney. He had 4 less disposals with 24, 70% disposal efficiency. He had 340 metres gained, 10 contested possessions, 5 clearances, 4 marks, 3 goals, 1, the 1 goal assist, 12 score involvements, but laid 8 tackles. And I thought it was the defensive effort of Isaac Heaney, personally for me, that got him over the line, because I'm a person who really loves seeing defensive effort from midfielders, especially when there are so many in the competition that are so one-dimensional and just, offensively sound, but they're not really built defensively. I don't know. You could throw it up. Isaac Heaney and Chad Warner were definitely 3 and 2. You could swap it any way you want, but for me, I've gone with Isaac Heaney. This is where the discussion of controversy comes into the mix, and I'm so fucking happy that another instance of this happens later within the round, that we can compare the pair, and it actually happened later that exact night. So it just shows, again, disparity between umpire decision and indecision. Some teams that are paid it, some teams that aren't. But we had Collingwood take on Adelaide. I think they said it is the 5th or 6th time now that these teams have met, and it's been decided by less than a kick, because Collingwood escape a late scare with a 4-point win in a very controversial finish. Now, for those of you that saw it, you would have probably, had your opinions at the time. I thought Isaac Rankin was stiff. We have then later seen that the lab has analysed it, and he ran 24.2 metres or whatever it is without a bounce, and obviously, letter to the law, you've got to take a bounce every 15 metres. So he's ran almost 10 metres more than he should have, without taking that bounce. So it justifies it. But the fact is, we very rarely see that paid. I mean, how many times do we see players from fullback run almost the full length of the 50, just shy of, and because it's not on a straight line, it's on an angle, they're afforded a little bit more time. It's a little bit strange, but the game pretty much finished with Isaac Rankin, ball in hand, 40 odd seconds left. He runs that margin, kicks the ball up forward. The umpire blows the whistle, pays the free kick, 14 seconds left. Josh Dacos milks the clock, game over. And some people argued that Adelaide were robbed, and it's now the 3rd time within 12 months that Adelaide have been screwed over by the umpires, because we know they had the goal that Ben Keys kicked against Sydney last year to put them into the finals. They were robbed of that. We obviously know Sam Draper should have been pinned for holding the ball earlier this year, but wasn't, and now we've got this finish as well. People like Graham Corns have come out saying if it was Nick Dacos that was running that ball, and due to Vic bias, it wouldn't have been paid. you know, fact of the matter is, we can argue it all we want, but he ran too far. And as somebody who originally thought he didn't, but it was proven he did, I'll swallow my own words. But later on in this exact round, there is a player who does it not once but twice in the same run in the exact same game and doesn't get pinned. And this is why I'm saying that umpires' interpretations, when they pay them, when they don't pay them, who they pay them for, who they don't pay them for, the indiscretion is way too far. And we need to really, instead of investing all this money on shit that they're investing, how about we invest time in the umpires learning how to fucking adjudicate the game properly and fairly? That's just me. That's just my opinion. But aside from the controversial finish, this was a great game of football to watch. The back and forth was sensational. It's one of those games of the neutral you love to watch because you're always on the edge of your seat. You know, Isaac Rankin kicks that late goal, puts Adelaide up. Collingwood then scratching and clawing. They get the fast break. Nick Dacos gets the ball to De Goey. De Goey kicks the goal. It's just magical moments of football to watch. I really love close, down in the trench kind of moments in football when players really dig deep to lift their team. This was a great game. With that being said, is Collingwood officially back to their best? And I think they might be. And some people are arguing that even though they had a really shaky start, that the form they're now finding now is better than the form they had last year. Now, I'd probably go against that. I think the form they had last year was greater. But with the personnel that they've had missing through injury or through suspension, whatever the case may be, they've had a few debutants come through in recent weeks, and they're all having active input. And this is where, as a Richmond supporter, I would really love to see Richmond get to a point where we can have success while having these young kids come in. I suppose injury has hampered Richmond to the point where, you know, it's West Coast like, really, and we'll get to that in the Richmond-Brisbane game. But Collingwood really starting to play good football, really good football. And it's this football now that have them pushing up the ladder, potentially finishing in the top 4 at the end of the year. Could they go back-to-back like I predicted at the start of the season? I think all points and all avenues point to yes. I don't think, though, they're as good as Sydney. I think if we get Sydney versus Collingwood, Sydney would flog them. I just don't see at the moment where Sydney's next loss comes from. And I think they probably are due one, just to bring them down to earth a little bit. But on the flip side, Adelaide really starting to play good football as well. It's just a question of whether or not they'll play finals football, because they're sitting kind of in limbo at the moment where there are a lot of teams that are playing competitive enough to still remain in that kind of fight. So where they finish, who knows? I mean, I had them personally finishing in the top 8. A lot of people might have had them finishing top 4. But at least it's starting to show good signs for the Crows and for their supporter base, and showing that they've got that competitive nature in them. They've got good football in them, and they've come out this week saying that they're going to hit the trade period hard at the end of the year, and they're wanting to, you know, move up the ladder. So they're going to be a very interesting watch over the next couple of seasons. I don't know. I just don't really. I struggle to get my head around the media beat up about Rankin running too far and people's opinions on it. At the end of the day, you know, we've had the lab work. It's been given to us. We've seen he's ran too far. I don't know why the conjecture is still happening. But 3-2-1 for this game. Probably again, maybe controversial to some. Now, I've taken to social media with my take on this, and the Collingwood fans don't like it, but this is how I see it. I've given the 1 vote to Scott Pendlebury, 30 possessions, 70% disposal efficiency, 380 metres gained, 6 clearances, 2 marks, 2 goals, 2 goal assists, 8 scorers involvements, 3 tackles. Very Scott Pendlebury-like. And it's good to see at his age he can still produce quality football. 2 votes goes to Nick Dacos. This is where the Collingwood fans dragged me, because he had 41 disposals, but he ran at 58.5% disposal efficiency, and he only went at 30% by foot with the 21 kicks that he had. He did gain 540 metres, don't get me wrong. He had 22 contested of his 41, 14 clearances, the 1 mark, 1 goal assist, 7 score assists, laid 5 tackles. But to me, Isaac Rankin was best on ground, and I feel Isaac Rankin was more influential with the ball that he had. He had 30 disposals, so he had 11 less. He ran at 73% disposal efficiency, 699 metres gained, had 8 clearances, 2 marks, kicked that 1 goal at the end of the game that could have very well been the match winner, 4 score involvements, 4 tackles. Now, Dacos was better in some aspects than Rankin was, had more disposal, yes. I just feel Nick Dacos, for the amount of ball he had, didn't have the usual silky game that we're used to seeing him play. And I don't know whether that's because we are holding him to a higher standard because we know the level he can play at. But I just feel when the moment came, you know, Isaac Rankin breaking away from packs with speed, hitting up his teammates, you know, being able to kick that clutch goal that could have won the game at the end of the game. He took moments better than Nick Dacos did. And people are going to come at me. I'm happy to take the criticism. Again, the votes that I give out are all opinion based, as all votes would be for people that do similarly to what I'm doing. So I open discussion in the comments down below, as always, for discussion about that. But I just think Isaac Rankin on the day was more influential than Nick Dacos. Feel free to answer that in the comments down below. Who do you think had the better game and had the better influence between the two? Up at NG Stadium in Sydney, GWS hosted the Bulldogs in a game where the Bulldogs might have kicked 22 behinds, but they still managed to walk away 27-point victors. It was a game that I thought the Bulldogs were leaving the door wide open every time they missed a score opportunity, but GWS struggled to find avenue to score. I mean, they kicked 6 goals, but Jesse Hogan kicked 3 of those. Toby Green kicked the other 3. And it's not a GWS outfit we're used to seeing, because we're used to seeing Callum Brown hit the scoreboard. We're used to seeing players like Tom Green, Josh Kelly, who's out injured at the moment, but Josh Kelly would come through, he would score. I think it was, as a neutral, just stepping back and seeing the drop-off between this GWS and a GWS that we've seen play in recent weeks. The disparity between the two was so huge, and I don't know what led up here. I don't know whether they missed Josh Kelly's outside run. You know, the usual suspects still stood tall for GWS. I mean, Whitfield had a monster amount. Harry Himmelberg had a huge game. Tom Green had a huge game. Stephen Coniglio had his moments. Callan Ward was influential because he was able to clamp down hard on Marcus Bontempelli throughout the game. But they still couldn't find an avenue. And I don't know where this leaves GWS moving forward, because we now have seen them in a position where they started the year off so strong, and yet they've lost a considerable amount of games in their last 5 weeks, and the drop-off has been quite severe. And I don't know whether they were all hyped to start the season. And on the flip side of things, you've got the Dogs, who I'm still not sold on. I still think there's some things going on behind closed doors. I still think that there could be players on the move at the end of the year. Their inaccuracy this year has been pretty like, you know, in your face. Like, they've had games where they've missed a lot of shots on goal, and you know, is this going to be a thing that's going to cost them making finals? You know, all this inaccuracy leading to lower percentages. You know, if they're going to play against teams that are higher up on the ladder that are considered contenders, you know, failing to score, is that going to cost them games? And I don't know. This was a very what if game. It was a what if Bulldogs were accurate. You know, what if GWS had more influence on moments. I don't know, this game's just really no man's land for me. It just leads me to a point where I really don't have much to say about this game. It was kind of just a head scratcher for me. It was I don't know. I love watching football. I've got a deep passion for it. I watch every game every weekend. But yeah, this was a game to me where, even though I sat down and watched it, I was left baffled. I just questioned what was going on. Like, you know, even with players underperforming for the Bulldogs, they still managed to find a way. But GWS had so many players firing, and they just couldn't find avenue. It was really weird. I don't know. It was just a what if game for me. That's all I'm saying. I'm just going to dive straight into the votes for this one, because I think I think this one's probably better off to move on from. The one vote I'm giving to Ed Richards. Had 27 disposals. Did have a low disposal efficiency in 59, but I mean, he had 673 metres gained, 12 contested possessions, 10 clearances, 6 marks, kicked 2 behinds, so he added to that tally. He had a few tackles as well, 8 score involvements though. His move into the midfield has been one that has been interesting because the Bulldogs bat so deep in the midfield and now they've thrown in a defender into the midfield mix, but he's actually relished the opportunity, so I don't know. We'll see how he goes moving forward. The 2 vote to me goes to Harry Himmelberg. I thought defensively he was absolutely sensational. 30 disposals at 83%, 570 metres gained, 12 marks, 3 tackles. He had the 1 score involvement, but he plays deep. He's a player who has really reinvented the wheel for himself moving back defensively, and was one of the better games he's had in recent weeks quite comfortably. Lockie Whitfield could have very well been in the mix for votes as well. Similar stat line, but I think it's just the 12 grabs that Harry Himmelberg took. Just put him over that line for me. Best on ground though, and I think this player hasn't been spoken about as near enough as he should be, considering the average contested possessions, the average disposals just in general. He's ranking amongst the top 5 midfielders in the comp, and that's Adam Treloar. Comes out and has 35 disposals at 71%. He only, though, had 270 metres gained because he had 23 handballs out of that 35 disposal count. And I feel the handballs that Treloar have are very minimal. They're like very either backwards or kind of sideways. But still, 23 of the 35 were contested. He had 6 clearances. He had 9 direct score involvements. He had 4 tackles. I'd be interested to see where Adam Treloar sits when it comes to All-Australian, because the stats are adding up that he's one of the better midfielders in the comp, but nobody's paying him any mind. St Kilda versus Fremantle at Marvel Stadium on Saturday night was an arm wrestle. It was an arm wrestle all the way up until 3/4 time, and then when the game was on the line to be won, Fremantle were just better. And again, it was a game where inaccuracy could have cost them, but they still managed to get over the line with 9 goals 18. It's weird to see that in some instances teams are being so inaccurate, but they're blessed enough to still be able to get over the line as much as they did. I mean, they score 18 behinds and they win by 17 points. If they kick, 8 of those as goals, they end up smacking a team. It's very, again, puts you in a situation of what if, because it really makes you question whether these teams are genuine threats, because if they can convert half of the goals that they're missing, they're going to be winning by 10 goals a week. And you can argue the same for the Bulldogs this week against GWS. You can argue the same this week for Fremantle against St Kilda. It's very strange. It's just very weird. But Fremantle get the win, and Fremantle are having a kind of thereabouts year. They could have started the season 5-0, but they didn't, and people still feel they're off in limbo a little bit, but I think they're well better placed than what St Kilda are. St Kilda, every year we've seen recently from the top 8 to the next season, there's a huge drop-off. St Kilda's been the drop-off this year, and I don't know what it is. I don't know whether Ross Lyon's job should be at risk, because I feel if there was any other, coaches in the competition that played finals one year and then had a severe drop-off the next with the exact same list, it's not like they've had list changes or anything, or injuries or anything like that have severely altered the situation they're in. I don't know, but there's never been any negative conjecture about Ross Lyon this year and the underperformance of St Kilda, so I don't know whether that's going to completely continue to go under the radar. I mean, Max King, again, another week where he fails to deliver. I don't know whether or not he is the man St Kilda should be hinging all their bets on. I think they should definitely be looking for another key forward. I don't know whether it's at the behest of getting rid of Max King, but he's a player that promises so much, but yet delivers nothing. And I know my old man was very disappointed with the lack of effort from Max King this week. I know there's a lot of other St Kilda supporters that are in the same boat. So I want to know your thoughts as well. Do you think Max King needs to be persisted with, or is it time St Kilda looked elsewhere? When it comes to my votes for this game as well, it brings up a very contentious talking point, because Damien Barrett gave out his best 5 players for the round and didn't name the player that I'm naming best on ground in this game, and I feel he was probably within the best 3 performers of the entire weekend. So the fact that he was snubbed, I think, shows that ruckman in particular, unless your name's Max Gawn, go incredibly underrated and under the radar. The one vote for me I'm giving to Caleb Sarong. Again, just doing Caleb Sarong things. He'll be challenging for the Brownlow, I'm sure. 30 disposals, 76% disposal efficiency, 450 metres gained, 14 contested, 9 clearances, the 1 goal assist, the 8 score involvements, 5 tackles. 2 votes is going to Jordan Clark. Another great defensive game. 29 disposals, 82% efficiency, 720 metres gained, 8 marks, 2 score involvements, 8 tackles. I love a player in his position that plays the halfback role that marks and rebounds as quickly as he does, but then lays a lot of tackles as well. He's so defensively sound. I love his work. Best on ground was Rowan Marshall, and for a ruckman to have 31 disposals, he ran at 74% efficiency, 360 metres gained. Of the 31 disposals he had, 18 of them were contested. He had 39 hit-outs. He had 8 clearances of his own, 7 marks, 4 score involvements, and laid a game-high 9 tackles, and yet was not mentioned within the top 5 players of the round. It blows my mind. This is a monster effort, and this is what I've been saying for recent weeks for players like Tristan Cherry, who might be playing in a team that's losing, but he's racking up huge clearance numbers, huge tackle numbers, decent hit-out numbers, decent disposal numbers. I feel the only ruckman that ever gets spoken about in a positive light is Max Gawn, because we've come to accept that he has been the best ruckman in the comp for the last 5 years. Yeah, okay, that's fine, but got to give recognition where it's due. Rowan Marshall was easily top 3 players of the round, and I'm making sure that point's being fucking made. You heard it here. Also, at this point in time, I want to apologize if my voice is getting a little bit frokey, a little bit frokey. I'm thinking Pokemon. Pokemon's on the brain. If I'm feeling a little bit croaky, I've been very unwell for the last couple of weeks, and I didn't want that to hold me back from getting a video out. I really considered not doing the podcast, and I thought, 1 week away was enough. I've got to get back into it. We've got to do it. But yeah, we've been really run down, so bear with me. I'm a sick boy, but we're going to get there. And it's at the worst possible time, because Brisbane hosted Richmond at the Gabba, and I said all week to my mates, if Brisbane didn't win by 10 goals, that they weren't getting the job done. They didn't just win by 10, they almost won it by 20. Yeah. It was hard to watch this game. It's been hard to watch all season. Look, I can talk about injuries all I want. I can talk about umpiring, which we are going to talk about, especially 2 instances here though, because they link to other things. But Richmond's drop off this year has been one that I haven't fully embraced or swallowed yet. I still feel it's hard for Richmond to be competitive with so many injuries. I mean, out of this game alone, we lost my Kelty Lafau, we lost Ryan Mansell, Sam Naismith in the VFL goes and does an ACL. So we're now up to, I think it's 19 AFL listed players injured and 10 in the VFL, so 29 players for Richmond in total out. When you can field a team of injured players, like a full team, including 1 person on the bench, never a good sign. I'm just thankful that maybe some of those players might come back this week. Fingers crossed. But comprehensive belting, and this was a win that Brisbane needed. They needed to to really put the foot down on the throat here and run away with the game, and they did. And you know, it was again opportunity for another team to play themselves into some really good form, just like Richmond has allowed other teams to do all year. There's really not much in a positive light I can say about Richmond this week. I mean, Dan Rioli tried his guts out. Dion Prestia tried his guts out. Kane McAuliffe had a really good game, I thought. Mike Kelty Lafau has been thrown to the wolves, and I felt, you know, he's really stood tall in adversity. There's really not much else. It's just a week in, week out thing for me now, where I'm just wanting to see something out of the younger kids from Richmond, so it's all better for them getting exposure early. That's all I'm saying, because at the moment that's really all we can really hang our hat on. We're going to have to hit the trade period and the draft period rather hard this year, I feel. But Brisbane, they were beautiful to watch, as much as it pains me to say it against my own team. That being said, before we get into the 3-2-1, which is quite straightforward this week, really, 2 points of discussion I want to make with the umpiring here. Now, the first is linking back to Isaac Rankin running too far and getting pinned for it. Harry Sharp for Brisbane had a play where he ran from half back essentially all the way to half forward. And in that play, it was shown that he ran 22 point something odd meters on 2 occasions, and he wasn't pinned for it. Now, the media drum up has been, oh, if it was Nick Dacos running with the ball, he wouldn't have been pinned holding the ball, blah, blah, blah. But you've just gone now later on in the same weekend, and you've gotten Harry Sharp in an instance where he could have been pinned and should have been pinned for too far twice in the same run and didn't. And again, just shows disparity between interpretation. And it's not now coming down to umpires calling the game letter to the law. It comes across as if they're calling it based upon how they see it, you know, how their opinions are formed. And it really shouldn't be the case, because they should be calling it letter to the law. Just my opinion. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to go about it. I don't know whether they're going to have to put systems in place where the meterage is able to be worked out. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard for them to eyeball it. I understand that. But when you've got umpires calling it in one game and then not in another, it's just so incredibly fucking frustrating. Nothing frustrated me more this weekend than the decision that was paid to Brisbane and the non-decision that went Richmond's way, but then the MRO kind of went and fucked that all up. So Eric Hipwood tackles Nick Vlosten in a sling fashion that ends up with Nick Vlosten belting his head into the turf. The umpire at the time doesn't pay it a dangerous tackle. He pays holding the ball against Nick Vlosten, and Eric Hipwood kicks a goal. Now, I was pissed off enough about that as is. Resulting from that particular outcome, there was a scuffle where Eric Hipwood captures Vlosten a little bit high with a hit. Vlosten throws an open palm that doesn't make much contact. Hipwood flops and gets a free kick paid. So that was kind of like fucking, you know, nail in the coffin for me. That tipped me over the edge. But for the umpire to say that Nick Vlosten was caught holding the ball, there was no dangerous tackle, but the MRO has come out and slapped Eric Hipwood with a 1-week ban for that tackle. I don't know whether I don't know how to word this without me trying to sound biased. Every other instance we have seen this year where a player has been tackled and their head has hit the ground, more often than not, the umpire has called head-high free kick or dangerous tackle and paid it to the one being tackled. I just find it incredibly amusing that a Richmond player gets tackled and it was called holding the ball, resulting in a score for Brisbane. But then the MRO come out and kind of, you know, I've made comments this week that maybe Richmond should be using this as an example to the AFL to say what the fuck's going on, because I still feel we're getting umpired differently and it's going to cause so much fucking banter points between me and my mates. But I'm seriously at a point here where I'm wondering what's going to give. And that, you know, people are saying, oh, you know, Richmond supporters aren't going to games because they're getting belted every week. I think it's also because we want a fair shake and our back's already against the wall before the game's even fucking started. I'll die on that hill. Umpiring has not cost us a game this year. At all. But it's hard to stay motivated and want to stay in a game of football and, you know, watch a game as a supporter when the disparity of umpiring decisions is so far in between. It frustrates the fuck out of me. I need to wrap this game up before I start losing my mind. The one vote for me this week goes to Charlie Cameron. Kicks 5 goals. You know, people are saying he's back to his best. He defeated Richmond's VFL side. Let's get real here. But 5 goals, mammoth effort. Got to give it credit where it's due. Let's see if he has the consistency to back it up moving forward. 2 votes for me go to Dane Zorko, 35 disposals, 85 disposal efficiency percentage, 470 metres gained, 8 contested of the 35 is a bit alarming, but hey, he's playing a different role. 2 clearances, 15 marks, 1 goal, 9 scores, involvements, no tackles, surprisingly, and no tackles as well for my 3 vote for Lachie Neale. Very surprising that Zorko and Neale both go a game without a tackle each, but Neale had 36 disposals, 83% disposal efficiency, 580 metres gained, 9 contested of the 36. Just goes to show how rampant they were running over Richmond when they were all getting uncontested numbers this huge. 5 clearances, 11 marks, 6 goal assists, 11 score assists. Absolutely mammoth. Essendon, North Melbourne, Marvel Stadium, Sunday afternoon, went the way of 40 points to Essendon, but I feel it's a game that didn't convince me enough. This is a game that I feel they should have won by more. North Melbourne really dug in deep and hung in tough, and at one point I thought they were really going to push Essendon. They really showed something this game, and take away the scoreboard, I think North Melbourne probably walk away with their heads held more high than Essendon should, given how competitive North Melbourne was still able to remain through the duration. It now poses a question to all of us, I think, whether Essendon was convincing enough, because I still feel the measuring stick can't be pulled out for them until they win a final. Once they win one, we can then assess whether they're a threat, because I don't think you can call them a threat. They can play as well during the home and away season as they want, but knowing that when it comes to the crunch of finals, they've buckled under pressure, we really need to see them in action on that platform before we can truly kind of decide whether they've improved or not. I know that might be harsh, but I think that's the reality of where we're at. And that now further brings about a discussion point of, after 10 rounds of football, Essendon are sitting second on the ladder. They've got a favourable run over the next few weeks heading into their bye. Do you think they miss the top 4 from here, or do you think they're a top 4 lock? Comments down below. Let me know. I'm starting to die, and we've still got 2 more games to get through, so I'm going to dive into the 3-2-1 for this game. I gave 1 vote to Nick Martin. This game I felt was very hard to give votes to. But Nick Martin gets the 1 vote for me. 27 disposals, 81% disposal efficiency, 320 metres gained. Had the 1 clearance, but he had 9 marks defensively, laid a tackle, 4 score involvements. I think his influence around the ground was quite substantial. 2 votes, even though they lost, I'm giving it to Luke Davies-Uniacke. He had himself 27 disposals at 85%. Only the 195 metres gained, so not much movement, but he had 10 contested, 7 clearances, 7 marks, 2 goals, 8 score involvements, laid 3 tackles. Best on ground. I could have thrown around a couple of players here, but I've gone with Jai Caldwell. I thought defensively he was great around the ground. He had 25 disposals at 76%, 320 metres gained, 10 contested possessions, 9 clearances, 7 marks, 9 score involvements, 5 tackles. He was quite instrumental. And surprisingly, I think this is the first week where Essendon's played where I have not given a vote to Zach Merritt. Port Adelaide versus Hawthorn was one of the most fastest finishing games I have seen ever. This was fucking bananas, bonkers. I was listening to this game on the radio, and Hawthorn were 5 goals up at quarter time. Kind of wrestled it back to 3 or 4 goals at half time. Leading by 5 goals at 3-quarter time, and were leading by that margin for majority of the last quarter. And Sam Mitchell, I don't know what was going on in the coach's box, but they went into a defensive kind of mindset with 13 minutes to go and were short chipping the ball around, trying to maintain possession. You might be 5 goals up, but with that much time on the clock, don't piss fart around the ball. Fucking still try to get scores on the board, because nothing is guaranteed. And this game fucking proved it, because 23 seconds left on the clock after Willie Rioli kicks a goal to bring him back to 5 points. The commentators are going nuts on the radio, and they're saying, "Oh, there's 23 points left. There's no way they're going to get us. They're going to get a goal here." And with 5 seconds left, Darcy Byrne-Jones flies through after a fisted ball comes down from a pack in the forward 50, sockers it off the ground, puts it through the middle, and Port Adelaide win by a point. The clock stops with 1 or 2 seconds left on the clock. I almost had to pull over on the side of the road. I was so fucking dumbfounded. It was to think that in 40 seconds or 30 seconds, there were 2 goals kicked to win a game, and it wasn't as if like it was a goal after the siren. It was prior to the siren. So that's 2 of the quickest goals I've ever seen kicked in modern history. That was. I'm struggling to find a game where in regulation, in regulated time, that 2 goals are kicked within that 30-40 second period without a kick after the siren to win the game. It was insane. It was just, I'm still dumbfounded. I'm still lost for words, but I'm trying to work out what the biggest takeaway from this game is. Do we talk about Hawthorn's effort and how for almost 90% of the game they controlled dominance, or you could even argue 95, even 98% of the game they controlled it from start to finish? Do we talk about how well they played? Do we talk about the fact that they fumbled it late? Do we talk about how Port Adelaide, against a team that was touted to be bottom 4 and could very well still be bottom 4, fell over the line, and at home as well? So I don't know who this speaks volumes more to. Does it speak more volumes about the improvement Hawthorn's made, or does it speak more volume to the fact that Port Adelaide truly struggled against a bottom 4 team? And does that really take them out of the contender kind of situation? Because we know Rosie didn't play. He could have added a lot to this game. Yeah, sure. They didn't play Jordan Sweet because they wanted to award Vincentini for his performance the following week, but Lloyd Meek towed him up this week, so I wouldn't be surprised if Jordan Sweet came back in. Zach Butters was very quiet until the last quarter, where I think he had 14 disposals in the last quarter alone. It was a very strange game, very bizarre. Hawthorn just let it all away, and then within the last minute fumbled the ball and gave away 2 goals. It was. If you're a Hawthorn supporter, I don't know how you'd be feeling, because I know how Port Adelaide supporters are feeling. I can tell you that much. 3-2-1, let's do it. 1 vote, Zach Butters. 32 disposals, 75% disposal efficiency, 545 metres gained, 12 contested, 8 clearances, 5 marks. No score from him this week, mind you. 8 score assists and 6 tackles. Why only 1 vote for Zach Butters? He did fuck all until the last quarter. And I'm not going to give votes, or higher end votes that is, to a player that doesn't perform over a consistent period of time. The 2 vote for me goes to Dan Houston. I thought his game was instrumental for Port Adelaide during the day. 22 disposals at 81%, 480 metres gained. He had 10 contested, 2 clearances, 8 marks, 3 goals off of halfback, all from outside 50. Had 5 score involvements and laid 10 tackles for the game, which was equal high along with Willem Drew. Best on ground might surprise some. I'm giving it to Blake Hardwick. 23 disposals at 60%, 240 metres gained, 8 contested possessions, 3 clearances, 4 marks. No, I'm reading the wrong stat line here. Fuck, I'm an idiot. 23 disposals at 78%, 520 metres gained, 13 contested, 6 marks, 5 goals, 2 goal assists, 9 score involvements, 4 tackles. He not only was instrumental in the offensive game of Hawthorn, but at the end of the game was one of those players trying to shut it down to get the win for Hawthorn. He was so well-rounded in this game that I could not look at him for votes here. I could have either given him or Dan Houston the 3 or the 2, but I think that Blake Hardwick kicks 5, but then tried to play such an instrumental defensive role late, gets him over the line for 3. Final game of the round at Optus Stadium. West Coast hosting Melbourne. West Coast better by 35 points. This, to me, questions whether or not West Coast have now turned Optus Stadium back into a fortress again. And West Coast used to be one of the toughest travels, but we know in recent years West Coast have struggled severely. They're now starting to find their feet again, and it has popped up in a season where I don't think many would have expected much from them. I think they've already exceeded expectation at this point in time with the amount of wins they have, and they can only get better from here. They've got so many players in this team that are really starting to find some form that it's almost scary to think that if they can come into, back-to-back seasons moving forward now with this type of momentum, are we going to see them start rising up the ladder, sooner rather than later? As a neutral that has seen them go through so much, and now a supporter whose team is being hit as hard as West Coast team was hit during that injury run, and no other team prior to that had been hit as hard as West Coast, and no other team has been hit that hard since until this point in time with Richmond. And now as a supporter who can objectively look at it and subjectively look at it, it fucking stings. It hurts. And I always felt for West Coast, but I think the feeling for West Coast now hits a little bit harder to home because Richmond are now going through it too. But man, it's good to see West Coast playing some good football. They're playing really good footy, and they really had Melbourne kind of shell-shocked early. I don't know whether it was the fact that Jake Lever was subbed off early in the game, which put them into a kind of defensive stranglehold because Stephen May had to cover more ground than he usually has to on his own, because we're so used to seeing, that synonymous Lever-May kind of combination. Stephen May still did well on his own, but no Jake Lever in that defense kind of opens up holes, and it's a little bit worrisome for Melbourne moving forward to think that when Stephen May and Lever are gone, that maybe that defensively they're going to get opened up a hell of a lot more. While Melbourne's defense we're normally used to seeing being so defensively sound, their fucking forward line is terrible. And I know that's coming from a Richmond supporter that doesn't have a functioning forward line at all, but Ben Brown and Harrison Petty, acting as your 2 key forwards, have 8 disposals between them. Harrison Petty's 5 disposals at 20%. Ben Brown's 3 disposals at 66. They have 160 metres gained between the two of them. They kick 1 goal 2 between them. They had 1 mark between them as well. To think Jake Lever had 1 disposal before getting subbed off, and he played fuck all time, and Harrison Petty and Ben Brown played a full game and barely. Let's not get started. I could pick it apart all fucking day. I really could. Do we think after this performance, though, Melbourne's top 8 chances are at risk here? Because I think they really are. I think they're shaky as fuck. They can't continue going on with this inconsistent forward line. They can't expect fucking Christian Petrarca to kick 5 goals every week. I mean, Bailey Fritsch this week, he kicks 3 goals, but, it's not good enough. Shane McAdam comes in for his first game. He kicks a goal, probably serviceable in that retrospect. Caleb Windsor kicks a goal. It's just, I don't know, it's just really, really tough. I mean, Christian Petrarca only has the 1 goal himself, but he has a down game with only 20 possessions. Max Gawn has a really down game by his standards, only takes 3 marks around the ground when we've come to see him so synonymous with marking around the ground. Jack Viney, has a down game as well. It's just collectively they were all down. I mean, Clayton Oliver had a rather big game. Christian Salem had a rather big game, but apart from that, nobody else really stood tall, which is why when it comes to the votes, my 3-2-1 are going all the way of West Coast. And the 1 vote for me was incredibly tough because you could have gone Liam Duggan, you could have gone Jeremy McGovern, you could have gone Ruben Jimby. There was a few, but I went with Tim Kelly. 30 disposals, 60%, 550 metres gained, 14 contested, 8 clearances, 5 marks, 4 goal assists, 8 score involvements, 3 tackles. Harley Reid gets the 2 from me. Now, everyone was beating him up saying he was best on ground in this game. He was not, by any means necessary. He was listed by Damien Barrett as the second best player in for the round. He was not, by any means necessary. He wasn't even the best for West Coast, in my opinion. Huge game. But there's now talk about him being the best first-year player this century. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. I think the jury's out on that. I could name a few that are better. Let me know how you think about Harley Reid in the comments. I would love to have a discussion. But Harley Reid gets the 2 votes for me this week. 21 disposals at 90%, 440 metres gained, 10 contested, 7 clearances, 2 marks, 2 goals, 10 score involvements, 4 tackles. Great game. Was not best on ground, though, because best on ground, in my opinion, was Jake Waterman, who has played out of his fucking skin this year and is tied for the lead for the Coleman. There is a 4-way tie right now. 17 disposals at 88%, 220 metres gained. You're not going to get many metres gained when you're playing deep forward. 7 contested possessions, 13 marks, 5 goals, 1, 8 score involvements, 2 tackles. Absolutely fucking huge game. He has really been the deciding factor down forward for West Coast. However, I do argue that if he was playing in a forward line that had somebody else apart from Jack Darling in it, would he be performing as well as he is? Especially if someone like Oscar Allen come back in. I don't know how that affects Jake Waterman moving forward, but playing out of his skin, and I would be more than happy to see him win the Coleman this year. With all that being said, this is how our ladder is looking after 10 rounds of football. Well, 11 if you count opening round. I know some of us aren't, but hey, that's where we're at. Top 4 is currently Sydney, Essendon, Geelong and Port Adelaide, with Collingwood, GWS, Melbourne and the Gold Coast Suns rounding out the top 8. We have Fremantle and Carlton sitting in 9th and 10th, tied on the same amount of points as 6th place. So 6th to 10th right now are all on the same amount of points split by percentage. And that's why I'm saying teams like Fremantle and the Bulldogs being so inaccurate could cost them come the end of the year. Speaking of the Bulldogs, they're sitting in 11th, trailed by Brisbane, Adelaide and St Kilda, with the bottom 4 still being Hawthorn, West Coast, Richmond and North Melbourne. Crazy to think that at this point in time, Hawthorn and West Coast have both won 3 games of football and only, sit 3 wins effectively out of the top 8. That's fucking insane. That's really blown my mind. And at the moment, Richmond versus North Melbourne is probably going to be a fight for the number 1 pick, because percentage is both shithouse, and if North Melbourne win, that could potentially drop Richmond to the bottom, and we'll get the number 1 pick. Hey, I won't fucking argue that. One more thing before we leave. It'd be a miss of me to not show you the leaderboard for the Hip and Shoulder MVP Award for 2024. I'll probably still continue doing the top 5. I think it's just easier to do it that way. I do have a log of every single player that has gotten 1 vote, so later on in the year, maybe I can run through and show you systematically every single person like I had been doing in the past, but I don't think we need to do that anymore, because now we go through it in a different way. I can show you the leaderboard at the end, and hey, we can just move forward. It's happy days. I think it's more fluid that way. Let me know how you feel about the formatting changes I've done today, because I think it's for the better. But equal 5th, I have Isaac Rankin and Adam Treloar on 14 votes. In 4th place, I have Nick Dacos on 15 votes. In 3rd place, I have Caleb Sarong with 17 votes. In 2nd place, I have Zach Merritt on 21 votes. And taking a lead away from Zach Merritt, I have Isaac Heaney in 1st place with 25 votes. But that is round 10 officially recapped, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me for yet another video. Thank you for dealing with me being such a sick boy and being all over the fucking shop today. It was hard enough being sick and trying to do it, but obviously with the formatting changes I've wanted to do to try and make things a little bit more fluid and diving a little bit more deeper into involving stats for players that we're talking about and stuff as well. Do let me know what you think about the changes, because it tells me whether or not I'm on the right track to going the right way. You know what I'm saying? If you want to get on board with the community we are building, I would appreciate it if you did. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like on the video. That's all I ask. I know sometimes it's a little bit much, but hey, costs you absolutely nothing to do, and I appreciate every single person that has done so far. I'm looking forward to a break. Later in the week, there'll be a tipping video. I'll probably drop that tonight, if not tomorrow morning, and then Supercoach video will probably drop on Friday morning, because I'll have a better scope of ins and outs and stuff like that, and I don't think Thursday's game this week will affect my trades, so I'm happy to wait a little bit longer to drop that one, so keep an eye out for that. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.